Hello, today is October 15th of the second 5-week stretch of the fall semester for UAT. So, these past couple weeks we've worked a lot on removing all of the art assets that don't match with the art style. This past week has seen us pulling down the build file and working on it in order to further flesh out the Traffic Cop universe. And that has seen us pretty much just building entire levels instead of just demo levels. The other things that we've done this week are the on-take for new students. But yeah, so over this past week, pretty much just dialed up in further deciding what art assets needed to be made and rearranging what art assets we had, including building some more buildings using the modular assets that match the art style, and then building levels out of those. So what I'm going to be working on this next week is I've actually taken over responsibility for finally fleshing out the VR pawn and making sure that works. So we'll have a playable demo this next go round for people who actually have a VR headset. For everybody else, we'll have a video. Roadblocks, well, we have new people coming onto the team, and it can take a bit of time in order to get them pointed in the right direction. Typically, if I was in the military, I'd give them like a bullshit sheet of checklists just so that they could get their head on straight when they first get to the command. But here in the game studio, we pretty much just have a go around. I'm going to be scheduling some team building events to occur during this next week to help people get oriented and focused on the directions that they need to go. Aside from that, next week's work, or more mostly this weekend's work, is going to be based around getting the people rolled into the group and getting the VR pawn built. And I think I'll actually go ahead and stream it while I work on the VR pawn in order to help educate the rest of the team. One of the things that I'm probably also going to be doing this weekend and this following week is I'm going to do a streamed walkthrough of the current Traffic Cop code in order to do a much more in-depth explanation with interaction than if I just handed the new programmer the design documents and the programming documents, what they be. I feel that doing a guided walkthrough and streaming it and talking about it and being able to have questions asked and questions answered will be a much more impactful thing for bringing a new programmer on board. Other than that, art assets, as we're going through and we're building the levels, we're discovering additional assets that would be really nice to have that we don't. So getting all of that built up and working makes a lot more sense, because as we're going through it and actually starting to flesh out the levels, we are discovering that there are a number of shortcomings here and there that need to be addressed, especially when it comes to the art assets for the most crucial things on a traffic game, the road and the sidewalk. A lot of it is just some nicety stuff like, okay, well, we don't need sidewalks that bend that way. We could build it without using the assets that use sidewalks that bend that way. But in order to produce the correct kind of diversity that we want for the intersections and everything else, we actually have to have a setup where in which these various pieces exist, even if only because they fall within the line of sight of player. Because, to be honest, if it's out of sight of the player, there's no real reason to put a ton of effort into the asset. Like, when I went through and I built the real level, or first real level, I just threw gray boxes in the background. That was very lazy on my part, but it also gave it kind of that cool distance fade kind of aspect to it. I'm considering introducing a vertex shader for a smog-like background so that we can hide up some of the more gregarious sins of the project development and give it a much more authentic urban feel than what it currently has. Giving the tall buildings and putting the tall buildings up around the player makes the city feel much more real than it did before with the shorter buildings. Giving the backdrop skyline also has greatly improved that as well. I think the biggest importance of having the skyline and having the visual obstruction is to make people feel like they're immersed in a game, that they're a traffic cop working in a 1950s city, and sticking them in the middle of this has definitely helped bring it along. So, with the accomplishments of what we did for this past milestone, the game actually looks much more like a game now. It has unified art style. It has the clear direction. All of the core mechanics for the spawning, despawning, and everything have now been completely set up. Still waiting on the walk cycles, so I think I'm going to go ahead and pull down some matching assets or just some general assets from the Unity store and just stack in a couple Mixamo things to it while the remainder of the walk cycle is done, just so that we're no longer jammed up on the pipeline. Because swapping out the animation set isn't as much of a challenge as going through and having to build it from scratch 2-3 weeks from launch. So I'm going to go ahead and import some assets just so that we can move along on the pedestrian thing and get that all set up. Our AI system for it already exists and already works because we use it for the vehicles. So getting it set up so that we can use it for the pedestrians is cakewalk because it's the same system. It's just moving something different, if that makes sense. Roadblock wise, yeah, there's some hang up on the animations. We have some of the characters, but we need to go ahead and move ahead on the pedestrians, even if we have them traveling in T-pose. At this point, it just needs to get into the game so that we can start balancing the mechanics for it, and BA animations will come when the animations come. Programming wise, we've run into some conflicts when it comes to the hand recognition. So the thing that I'm going to do over the weekend is fully implement the controller controls instead of the hand gesture controls and get that completely knocked out of the way. So if we have hand gesture recognition at the time of launch, great. If we don't, we don't. But we will have controls and we will have a playable demo completely ready and set up and built by the end of next week. Other than that, there's no other major roadblocks. There's a need for additional art assets to be built and other things, but we have most of the game built. It's just a matter of bringing the art together and building additional levels. Alright, this has been my stand-up for Traffic Cop for week 2.1. Thank you for your time.